So comes from a presentation really, or a talk I do about the trends of the future of work. And one of the trends is working with the whole self. And now I can't see all of you anymore, but I'd like to see, maybe I can extend this a bit here. How many of you have read the book Reinventing Organizations? Can I get thumbs up if you have read it? Mel, can you see? No?
No, I don't see a single thumb.
Wow, that
Not
is
a
really
single thumb.
Okay, then I'll go a step back. So really to bring you all on a journey. There's this guy, Frederick Laloux. He is I think he's Belgium actually, French speaking by the sounds of it, right? As you can hear, French speaking, Frederick Laloux. And he worked for McKinsey, and then he had 2 young children. He thought, nah, I'm gonna go. I've worked enough, you know, he probably earned enough as well. And I want to spend my time with my children. And so he did. And then he started writing a book because he was really intrigued about a phenomenon that he started observing, because now he had time observing things. A phenomenon of a new type of organizations emerging all over the world, in all industries, all sizes, all countries, you know, public sector, non-profit sector, corporate sector. And he went like, what is this new species? It's like a new species of companies. And so he wrote this book, Reinventing Organizations, trying to describe this new species. And if you want, so you could call it a high consciousness species, or maybe future of work 4.5 or something like this. I would call it to align with what I said earlier. And he realized that they had 3 things in common. And that's going to lead to my slide. The first thing is that they had an evolutionary purpose. So not only were they purpose driven, like probably some of your organizations are or trying to be or become purpose driven rather than purely profit driven. It's a, you know, profit from purpose rather than profit for the sake as the purpose. But they had evolutionary purposes. So they actually keep listening to the world or to the bigger scheme of things to find out if their purpose is maybe meant to shift and change a little bit, because with their skills, they can follow the purpose as life asks it of the organization, rather than this is what the founder said 35 years ago and we're still following the same purpose. They kind of have an evolutionary purpose. So that's one thing. The second characteristic was that they were largely self-managed. So they were taking kind of agile self-management and self-managed teams to a whole different level, where literally they might have leaders, but they have no managers. Managers are more or less replaced by coaches. They have no decision-making power, but they help teams to find their way, resolve conflicts, take decisions together, etc. But it's basically a very flat type of organization, but more organized organically, like a forest. That's how he described it, I think, in the beginning of a book. He says, really, an organization could be like a forest, and it adapts itself to the seasons or to whatever happens in the ecosystem, in the environment. And there's no a board of trees where then the CEO of the oaks comes and the CEO of the Birks or whatever you say, and the CEO of the pines. And they come and they sit together around the table and say, we have to make a plan because winter is coming. It's just not like that in nature. So he says what these companies are doing, they're mimicking this. They say, oh, the squirrels are going for nuts. They're already digging things away. And this is happening and that is happening. And every element observes the other and learn from each other and manage each other in response to a whole natural evolving. And that's much closer also to some of the indigenous views of the world. So self-management and organic self-management was the second characteristic. And the third one is that they were dealing with whole selves. And that's where the slide comes into play. Whole self meant body, mind, heart, spirit of everybody involved. So they said every human is participating in what we're in our purpose, in our evolutionary purpose. There could be employees, the leaders, the stakeholders, any form of stakeholders, customers, suppliers, everybody. They're actually all humans. And they all have not just a brain, they have a body, and they have families and they have emotions and they have a spirit and they look for purpose and they're actually whole self beings. And how can we create an environment where whole selves can participate? So you don't just bring your head to work, or sometimes I felt at SAP, because it was a highly intellectual work, that you brought your personnel number and your brain. And if there had been a hook outside where you could leave your emotions and your divorce and your illness and all of that, you could leave it on a hook outside. That would be ideal. And I could just bring my brain to work. But of course, that doesn't work and it doesn't exist. Nowhere. This is just, even if we wanted to, we couldn't. And SAP actually wasn't like that. They had made a lot of space for the whole human being. We could, this is 20 years ago that I left SAP in Germany in the headquarters. And we could wear what we wanted. We had huge coffee corners. People were laughing and crying and going through their life. It was more like a university. The whole atmosphere was like a university. So you could be yourself like a student in a uni, much more than I had experienced, at some customers of ours. And that, I think it has also shaped me, that I lived quite a while in this environment. So this is to say about the whole self. So one way of looking at the whole self of a human is body, mind, heart, spirit, and there's many more aspects. So that's still a simplification. But the spirit, as I said, I would say is the ethics that people yearn for, and the purpose, and anything that's like soul searching, but also intuition versus the intellect. That's kind of in that department. So don't see it as something religious. Religion gives us space for that, though, for those of us who have a religion. So then there's this other aspect. And that is another way of looking how we can be whole, is being whole with the feminine and the masculine. And I will draw really from very ancient wisdom, like, the Indian wisdom is about the Ayurveda and the yoga and the scriptures that are behind yoga. And neither Ayurveda nor yoga are a religion. They are basically a lifestyle of longevity and a philosophy and a wisdom philosophy. They're not religions. Hinduism is a religion, but yoga isn't. And in the yoga scriptures, if you want, so they talk a lot about philosophy, and they call it Shiva and Shakti. And the Chinese ancient philosophies call it the Yin and the Yang. So Yang would be the masculine, Yin would be the feminine. And then we started mixing it just to start giving you a bit of a sense of it. The yoga community discovered that yoga traditionally had been taught and developed for men, particularly for young men, like 18 years old, too much testosterone, they had all over the show, particularly with the girls, too much energy, and sometimes taking it into the wrong places. We're talking the old days, probably still modern days as well. And so yoga, the physical yoga of asana and breathing, and a lot of the physical yoga was developed to tame that energy. And it was taught to men, and only to men. It wasn't taught to women. And so the yoga that came into the West was very masculine, was very yang. It's if in the extreme forms like Ashtanga yoga, you jump a lot and it's not very powerful. So you jump forward and you jump backwards, and like you really get into your power, and power yoga. And that's a yang yoga style. And then people, at some stage, maybe 20 years ago or so, there was kind of a realization it could be different. And they called it the yin yoga. And in yin yoga, it's very quiet. The music is much slower. And you go into a pose, and you don't go in and out really fast. You go in and you prop yourself up with pillows and blankets, and then you go into the pose, and then you let go. Let's say some of you know the yoga poses, like a cobra pose. It's really you lying flat on the ground, and then you lift up your shoulders, and then you lie there with your body flat. But then you would put lots of pillows and blankets, and then you would do nothing. You would let go. And then you would go inside and go, oh, that feels so, well, whatever it feels like. And you'd go inside, and the teacher helps you to go inwards. And it becomes a very soft and a very deep practice. And a lot of emotions get even released, because they are held in certain parts of the body that only start relaxing and releasing these emotions when we really, really rest. And in that way, you're like resting in a stretch. And then emotions can come out of your fibers, literally. Very interesting yoga. So it shows you a little bit the difference between what yang means, power, and so on. We go into more detail right now and into the feminine. And we're having a huge conversation in our society, often about men and women, but actually what the conversation really is about very often is actually the masculine and the feminine. And I show you now why. And I think I'll be curious what you have to say when you see the words. So what I'm trying to do is try and explain to you what yin and yang is. And every man and every woman has yin and yang in them. Just like we have blood and air in ourselves, we have yin and yang. It's not exclusive to men or women at all. And you could even say a yoga can be yin or yang. So it's more a description of qualities. And I'll show you the qualities now. And I think it'll become clearer. Right. So these are masculine qualities. The qualities of freedom and direction and logic and reason. They're beautiful qualities: focus, integrity, structure, stability, passion, independence, discipline, confidence, awareness, discernment, authenticity, strength, clarity, assertiveness, order, convergence. Lots of structure, lots of oomph, you could say. And if you think of Yang yoga, you can see that many of these words would describe that kind of yoga: disciplined, confident, focus, structure, you know exactly how you're doing the pose. And that applies to any other, there can be a lot of sports that where we need these qualities to get really good at it, if you want so. And maybe if you think about how we run companies to make now the stretch to leadership, these are probably values we quite appreciate in leaders in our society, particularly I'm talking about the corporate world that I know best. And corporate, I'm including the, large government organizations, etc. And even some, large NPOs have moved into a corporatized efficiency model, if you want. So you can see there's stability and structure, like even like org structures and focus, and have a reason why you do it. It's all logical, and you have plans, and you have order and plans for order, all of that. And then a little bit what we have also seen is that sometimes this energy can go overboard, too strong. They're beautiful energies, but when they become too strong, then this can happen. Like arrogant, insensitive, violent, power hungry, and spiritually empty. And I think we've heard that as something that we felt maybe about some people that we've been working with. And that's not just men. There can also be women that are, can be women just as well, who are in that same really strong yang mode. But we can hear that about politicians, about countries, about all kinds of parts of our current Western world in particular, where it's always yang, it's always on the go, more growth, more this, more that, more workload, more. That kinds of is become, and I want to show you the balance. Can you recognize that? I can't see all of you. But have you sometimes thought, it's too much of that? I'm not really loving that so much when it gets a bit too much. I can see a few faces.
Yeah, it's Mel here. I can totally recognize this in myself. In fact, it's really interesting because early on in my career, I used to have Robo Mel for the difficult conversations, who was very mechanical. That's why I called her Robo Mel. There was no emotion, no compassion, no anything. And it's interesting, isn't it?
It is. So who else can see that? Or, you can see it in the world or in politics or in business, where you can see the good masculine, and then maybe where it went out of balance. Who has another example?
I'm looking.
Or you think you've never seen this ever? You've never had a colleague that you were sitting with in a boardroom or somewhere, and you've never experienced that. What is that?
Yes.
Tess. Thank you, Tess. Go ahead. Yeah, who else? And I love it when you raise your hand like this with your little hand, because even whilst I'm presenting, I can see your little hand come up and it tells me who it is. Who has another example, or has maybe worked with somebody like that could have gone out of, or witnessed someone or something out of balance like that? All right.
That goes really nicely into what we were talking before about self-awareness. Because of course none of us are perfect.
Exactly.
We're always going, it's always an equilibrium.
It's almost as well
to have the terminology. I'd like to make 3 comments that were really valuable that I heard. They were all valuable, but there were some key things. The one is under stress, for example, also when we're competing or but any other stress, like there's a high risk or a reorganization or something. Under stress, we humans tend to go out of balance. Yes, and I don't know if you've done that over the last few days, but if you know about the amygdala hijack, did you talk about that, Mel?
But in your brain, talked about the fact that we use the fight, flight, and freeze, and we talked about a specific technique called pause, where you pay attention and allow and uncover and then separate and exhale and get on, so that we can choose what we want to do rather than feel like compelled or driven by something that's not our best self.
So with the amygdala, what happens in your brain in that fight, flight, freeze or appease mode is that you're thinking, empathic, listening, problem solving, creative, all the higher human functions that including the ones that are here: direction, logic, reason, integrity, all of these things. They go out of the window when the amygdala is hijacked, particularly by fear. Can also happen by other emotions, but particularly by fear. When it gets hijacked, the amygdala, and it does a switch, it says shut down at the front, it's survival time. It goes back into your limbic system in the back, into your reptilian brain, and then it operates like crocodiles. You have no more access, or very little access, to the capacities that make a human actually human. And so we can become quite reptilian. And if you think of a crocodile, that would be aggressive, cruel, mechanical, it just eats you. Arrogant, I'm stronger than you, insensitive to your emotions and your pain, it's violent. So I think this, you can see here how this describes almost a reptilian behavior. And that is because the brain part that has the higher functions has actually shut down. So there is a physiological reason, neurological reason. And that's why it is so important. That's the other little gem I wanted to pick up on, is the self-awareness. If we're not having the self-awareness to realize when we have been hijacked, and when our amygdala has been hijacked and we've become reptilian, if we're not having this mindfulness to catch that moment when we're flicking backwards into the reptilian brain, then we will hang around there for a while until the stress levels go down, and slowly the front starts switching back on. And we might even go, and I know we all have experiences that, oh my God, what did I say? What did I do? This is not me. This is not me. I'm never like that. I don't want to be like that. We've all done it, and I see a few heads nodding. So this just happens to you physiologically. Now, mindfulness and meditation and these things are not, they're really nice to do, and it makes you feel good. But the main thing that I find important in terms of our conversation is it gives you the tool to catch yourself when you start flicking back. Early stages, early warning system. I'm becoming nervous. I'm becoming fast talking. I'm becoming something. And if you're not now stepping in with some balancing, and we talk about the balance just now, and you don't start balancing, and you will flick out of balance, and you might end up in some way like this, or even like that. Or you might go, I don't want to become like this. I'm going to withdraw altogether. I'm going home. I'm not becoming a leader because I'm scared of becoming like this. I've seen myself. I'm not talking about me. I'm making a story. I see myself becoming like this every so often. I don't want to be that person. I'd rather give up the job and work somewhere else, because we don't want to be like this. And we cannot, the environment is not, and we are not powerful enough yet to manage our own state. And this is the third gem, is the collective consciousness. So if there's collective consciousness around and aggressiveness is good, then it's very difficult to not be it, because your environment is pushing you in that direction. If aggressive brings you to the top, and if you think of the language, war for talent, and if I gave you 5 minutes to put in the chat some warlike names or words that we use in the corporate world, there you think you're in, like, yeah, you are in a war. It's words that are aggressive, marketing terms, heavily aggressive words. And so we have normalized some of these things, and we make as if it's okay. And so we don't feel anymore that it's out of balance. On top of it, it leads you to the top sometimes in some organizations. So, and you want to continue being a leader because you want to take care of the people that you're caring for, that you're helping to grow. And so you need to be at the top, but then you have to play that game. And this is very convoluted, isn't it? Very convoluting. And I personally, this is my personal opinion, I think a lot of women are really not sitting well with that. And a lot of women have chosen not to go up that pathway of elbows. And that's why I think that's the reason we have lower leadership numbers than men. It's not the kids. It's not the children. Look at you. I mean, I'm sure half of you probably have children and are leaders. Look at Jacinta. That's not the reason. We just don't want to participate in that game. We don't like to play Monopoly. We like playing another game that's more friendly. Settlers of Catan, for example. Yeah, much more friendly game. It's a game we don't like particularly as women. That's my personal opinion. I didn't like it. So I decided I will always do a fabulous job, but I'm not going to play the elbow game and the whatever game out of balance game.
We've not been conditioned to do that.
Say that again, please.
If you actually think back to childhood and things like that.
So the nature and nurture kind of conversation, we haven't been nurtured necessarily in that direction. But our school system, to be frank, if you look at the green list there's quite a number of things they do instill in boys and girls, like logic and reason and, order, a certain level of assertiveness and so on. But yeah, we can see, so there is an overlap between the masculine feminine conversation and the male female. But I think I just want to make this very clear again. I've seen, and I'll be very not politically correct now in my wording, I've seen real bitches out there, real bitches, long hair, suits on, and out of balance, really out of balance. And they were more male. You know how we say that sometimes she's more man than a man? I think you've heard that or seen that even in international politics, Can
I make a comment here, Sandra, because it's something that I found useful in dealing with this, especially when you're dealing with somebody who is very assertive, well, not assertive, but aggressive and condescending and arrogant and everything. And when you're trying to balance that energy, a tactic, speaking tactically, that I've found works really well is to match their energy and then bring them back to your energy. So if you're trying to be more in the feminine, to have the courage, we've been talking a lot about cultivating courage, having that courage to step outside of your happy place, to match their energy, only to then be able to bring them back to your energy. You often have more success in bringing someone with you when you match their energy initially than if you try a different approach.
And I remember my very first job and in a German engineering company, very big, very global, big engineering company. And there were all the women that were employed, there were PAs. At the time we called them secretaries, this is a long time ago. And other than two women who had studied, there was myself and we had a very big library, and the librarian had studied library science or whatever that's called. That's it. Thousands of men. Wherever I called, they would say, who are you the secretary of? Who are you calling for? And I'd say, I'm in the mergers and acquisitions department. I'm nobody's secretary, but I need data from you. I need stuff from you. And it'd be shaken, you know? And I said in meetings, and that's to Mel's point, I remember I was in a meeting with my own colleagues who respected me and they knew why they had employed me. I had to hit with the fist on the table to match their energy. Literally, there was no way I couldn't get verbally to them. They weren't used to a woman there yet. And I used my fist. And that was the day when I understood about this masculine, feminine thing. And when I started reflecting, where do I want to go with my career? How much do I want to sell my being, my way of being? And I had lived in France. So if you think, yeah, we're going to go to the feminine now, and we'll have more time to talk and go around this. Think of, I will close the door here because it's getting cold here on my Waiheke Island, because the trees behind, the sun goes behind the Pu'utakawa tree, and then boom, it gets cold in New Zealand, doesn't it? But whilst I'm closing the door, I'd like you to put in the chat countries or nationalities where you find the women, or you find a lot of femininity, let's say in men and in women. Let's not differentiate too much. Which countries or cultures do you find there is a lot of femininity without you yet knowing what the qualities are, just what your feeling is? And I'll be back. In which countries do you think there's a lot of feminine energy, feminine behavior? There we go. Yes. Oh, I'm just seeing here, Bali, yeah, good example. France, Italy, France, Spain, France. So it's Mediterranean. And now, you know what my favorite example is? The Indian women in their saris. Man, they're like goddesses. They're walking on the planet as if they were goddesses, and they have this gracious way of moving. And so isn't India here, Philippines, Bali, India, there's some amazing femininity in some places, and we can kind of feel it. And definitely, so I lived in France and Italy before I worked in that company, and I had really embraced the feminine. Malta, that's also a good one. I had really embraced the feminine from, you know, in every aspect, how you related to men. You would go to the butcher and to the baker, and they would kind of play with you. They weren't sexual or anything. They made you feel good as a woman just because you were a woman, because you were feminine. And then you would go and make them feel masculine. And there was, everywhere where you went, there was this dance between the feminine and the masculine. And it wasn't a sexual thing. It was a mutual dance of appreciation of differentness, and a dance. You can't dance alone. So you dance with someone else. And they dance a lot, this dance between the feminine and the masculine. So yeah, I think the feminine was a bit alive in me. So let me show you some words to describe that. So here they come on the slide. Surrender, receptivity. I'm going to taste them slowly. Receptivity, adaptability, intuition, creativity, beauty, flow. You think of the sari, how it flows. Sensuality, nurturing, affection, sharing, gentleness, patience, vulnerability, empathy, inclusion, openness, variety and flavors, trust, harmony. And just put in the chat now, how does that make you feel? How do you feel when you hear these words? What's happening inside of you? How does it make you feel, these beautiful words? Wow, look at that. That, amazing. Look at that. Peaceful, relaxed, calm, soft on the inside, calm. How do you want your employees to feel?
Exactly that. Oh, I said that out loud.
Yeah, no, that's good. No,
I thought I was on mute.
that out loud. Exactly that. You probably just said out loud what people were thinking. Awesome, you are thinking. And okay, now comes the big leadership philosophy of, and books and books and books about psychological safety. I just induced psychological safety in you by reading you a list of words. So how if we lived like that, if we added that, so, and I'm not saying that on the masculine green values aren't beautiful. They're very helpful, and I wouldn't want to miss them in my life. I would feel amputated if you would take these values away from me. But I want to make more time for the feminine ones, because this is me personally, I have overspent energy on developing and using and displaying and cultivating the masculine green values. And the other green ones I had to read many times to go, oh yeah, and am I living this, and I'm living that, and where am I living this, and I'm living that even with myself, and where am I living this with others? And so I thought these were really interesting questions. Any comments? This is really for us to explore this. We don't need to do any exercises. It's us being together and getting our head and our heart around it. Yeah, Tess, go ahead. I'm glad that you're stepping forth.
Well, and my values and some of the things.
I could agree with you more. I think that's why I'm saying every woman and every man deserves to live all of these beautiful qualities. Every single one of these qualities should be able to be lived. Anya, what do you want to add? There's two more hands up. Maybe Rebecca first. Sorry, I didn't watch, so please apologize if I'm taking you in the wrong order. Rebecca, maybe you start. Thank you very much. Justine, that's another hand I can see at the moment.
Yeah, hi. I was just sort of thinking and sort of going back to what you were saying earlier, Sandra, when you had to like bang your fist on the table. You think that a lot of the masculine qualities women had to use and actually get out of balance so that they could even get into that corporate space. And you know, that sort of aggressiveness coming through, and often it gets referred to as, you know, she's hard nosed, she's this, she's that, and yet in men it's sort of seen as, you know, if a good thing, you know, it's there's that real just unbalance there, and I think getting that balance with that feminine stuff coming through, that's when you sort of have that nice equilibrium. But yeah, I think many women had to show those very masculine qualities and get them out of balance, even just to be heard.
Yep. Tiffany, thank you so much, Justine, as well. Thank you very much. And I want to pick up, I'll be very honest with you, because I'm now in the age group where I can, and then Justine, I'll ask you again. Thank you. Or did you want to add something, because it's maybe better now? Or is your hand still up, Justine?
Yeah, sorry, I have to take it down.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I'll be, honest with you because I can. The word well-being, there's, you know, rightfully, we're looking now at well-being because there wasn't well-being for a very long time. And there is, I don't know if you followed that, but in my world where I'm, you know, in my fringe world where I'm digging around, there is an increasing talk about corporate collective trauma. So collective trauma can happen for a whole nation. Let's say, you know, I mean, I'm German, so Jewish people would have experienced a collective trauma, and it impacts over many generations. I won't go into the colonial conversation, but I guess you can appreciate that as well. And it's even very difficult to grasp, and it's very difficult to quantify, and it's something that's in a field, often in a collective field. So an individual might be brought up in a different way and have a personality, and then the collective can still come. And there's a conversation that over the 150, 200 years of becoming ever more corporate and ever more reorganization and short-term focus and double-digit growth and war for talent, and you name it, right? I'm just starting the list. That this way of living in these corporations, particularly with out of balance, partially with out of balance expression, has actually traumatized the humans, the collective corporate humanity has actually been traumatized by that. And they are, you know, if you think of a traumatized child or a traumatized human, they kind of withdraw a little bit, and a little bit what we just described, in terms of sometimes we want to withdraw from this because it's actually feeling painful. And so now luckily we have a re-emergence of well-being, which is acknowledging the need that we need to take care of people and make them well again. So there was a degeneration of health. And you know, there's a book where this professor from Harvard, I think, or somewhere, he wrote how many people die from working, literally die, physically die. Yeah, I can't remember what the number was. It was too big for me to remember because it was too depressive. Now we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands. And so that's the extreme of the trauma. And then there is other traumas on the way, because when we're always very masculine and we have to ramp up the testosterone and the adrenaline and whatever, well, we're supposed to menstruate and have babies. So I mean, in my personal opinion, as a holistic practitioner of yoga and yoga therapy and so on, maybe that's not so good for the hormonal system if you want to be fertile. And there is, you know, women who run marathons, they are pushing their hormones to a degree that they stop menstruating. There comes a natural infertility because the body says, this is too stressful. This is too stressful. I have to put all my energy into that. I don't have time to have babies. This is not a safe place. This is not the place of surrender, receptivity, adaptability, blah, 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 where I can have a baby in my belly. So this is having potentially physiological outcomes on our society. And so there is now people who dare saying it. So I dare saying it. And I think you are all here, and I know that, and I can feel that, because we don't want that. We don't want to be part of something like this. We are all seeking for ways of how we can bring goodness into the world. And that is the full, both green lists. How can we bring all of that for a better world, a better place, the purposes of our organizations, if it's health or, you know, finances is a good purpose too, helping people to have a home because they can't yet afford it. So helping them to find the money to have a home is a good thing originally. Good idea, good purpose originally. How it has been enacted sometimes has been a bit traumatizing. And therefore, surprise, surprise, engagement levels. I mean, I'm sure you all follow the Gallup numbers every year. Engagement levels are going down and happily further down. And I think, what are they now currently? I don't know, 67% of employees are not engaged or actively disengaged, which means they're taking revenge on their companies. So you sit in a claim, let's say in a insurance, that's my example, you know, an easy one to understand. You could pay the claim or not. You know, sometimes it's a bit on the cusp. If you're not liking your company, you're just going to pay out the claim because you're going to hurt the people that are hurting you. And this is not conscious. This is unconscious most of the time. I don't think people go to work and say, how can I hurt my company today? Really, I don't believe that of anybody. But I think when you're under enough pressure, like we said earlier, when we're under enough pressure and stress and so on, we start doing things we would normally never do. And often unconsciously, we won't even realize. And I'm painting a bit of an extreme picture because I want to bring the point across just how important it is that we're having this balance and that we're bringing these feminine values, and that as women leaders, we are not shying away and use, let's say, our strength. I'm taking now my masculine ones, my freedom and my strength, and I stand up and I make a logical reasoning why it's good to work with empathy and gentleness and sharing. And that's when I stand up as a leader and I use both. And I use the one, a bit like what Mel was saying, I'm matching the masculine energy whilst creating a space, midwifing space for the feminine qualities. And the people who can do both, they are the better leaders, there's no doubt. And in the end, they come to the top. Because I'm not saying drop the masculine values at all. There are beautiful values. And the beautiful values in the feminine. And now McKinsey has done a study, I remember, I read it a few years ago, and it was about the feminization of the workplace. They didn't say more women in the workplace. They talked about the feminization of the workplace. Mel is nodding heavily. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm thinking I've just had this visceral reminder of this thing that I went through when I went through my divorce about 6 years ago, you know, when my ex-husband and I built this successful business together, and so much of my identity was tied up with that. And, you know, family, everyone in my family is accountants except for me. I'm the black sheep. And my whole life had been head decision, head decision, head decision, head decision. What should I do? What should I do? And in that moment, I thought, screw it. I'm going to follow my heart. Oh my goodness, it was so scary because I had to ask myself what I really wanted. And that was, I had never asked myself that before. What did I really want? And which was for me, which was really bringing into that feminine space of kind of desire. What do I desire? What do I want? Not what's sensible, not what's prudent, but what do I want? And the metaphor I use for this is that it was like a train with a carriage and like a motor, an engine and a carriage. And the motor pulling it along was my heart, and the carriage right behind, coupled right behind, was my head. So I didn't go do something completely reckless, but to have my heart first and then my head second, which was a complete and utter revelation.
And that's what we call heart-based business, or heart-based behavior, or heart-based something where the heart. Okay, this is going to become much more spiritual now. I studied spirituality, you know, for a long time now. And so what I have understood, and this is just my understanding in the way I pictured for myself, is that in the heart, and I'm talking the middle heart, not the heart, not the one that beats, but the heart center, or the heart chakra, or however you want to call it. There's something when we go, oh, that comes from the heart. We don't touch our left, where the physical heart is. It's like the heart is somewhere here. And that heart is the seat of your soul. It's the seat of your essence. It's who you really are. It comes from the heart. That's how we say it. It comes from the heart. It comes from your deepest essence. It comes from your deepest love for the world, or for your children, or for whatever. And yeah, in that heart sits your soul, your essence, and your essence can be the CEO of your life. And then there's the mind. There's a very clever guy up there. There's the mind. And he is brilliant at identifying risks. Like, he's the risk manager in the company, in my being. He's the risk manager. And he knows everything that could go wrong. And he's going to bring it out, and he's going to create fear around it because he wants to protect me. But in no company have I seen, or no good company, have I seen the risk manager be the CEO. It's a catastrophe. You don't want to have the risk manager be the CEO, right? You want the CEO to have vision and to know where the train is going, to use Mel's analogy, and know where the road is, or where the North Star is. You can use whatever term you want, the vision, the inspirational part that drives you forward, that energizes you also forwards and upwards, and in all good directions. And so the heart, for most spiritual people, they will work mainly with the heart as the honoring of their essence, or their soul, or what they came for, the things that they carry specifically, uniquely, and make that the CEO. And if they have to take a decision like, should I divorce from this guy or not? They will not ask the head, they will ask the heart, and they will allow the heart to decide. And that's heart-based living. It's a spiritual way of living. So again, it has nothing to do with religion, if you want. So it's more the soul-searching type of conversation. So that's leading from the heart, is also heart-based leading. So if you have to ask yourself a question around, even strategic or operational management decisions, you can at least ask your heart, or ask everybody's heart. You could ask everybody's heart in the room, and then you could ask everybody's mind in the room. And then you can toss up what decision you should take with the collective intelligence of all the hearts and all the minds in the room. Because every heart, if you are aligned with your company, then your heart is aligned with the purpose of the company or the heart of the company. So if everybody in the room who's aligned with the company says yes to a certain decision, then chances are it's the right thing. Because the heart of the company is also the CEO of the company. It shouldn't actually be the human that's called CEO. Yeah,
Can
Mel.
I add something to that? Because this masculine energy in me that always wants to put structure around things. One way that I do this, because I coach people on, part of what I coach people on is their intuition, and so the people I coach, they're not going to make intuitive decisions. That is not what they're going to do. That is far too much of a stretch for them to leave the data behind. However, what I say to people is, once you've done your analysis and blah, 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 ask your intuition or your heart, what's going on here, and ask some more, use that as a springboard for some further analysis. So if your heart is saying, or your intuition is going, what about that? That seems important and we haven't thought about it. Don't just dismiss it and go, oh, that's just intuition, but go, how might I pose some questions to test that? So then it's kind of like that balance again between the masculine and feminine.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for bringing it in. So intuition is one of the feminine powers, and it helps to, and it's really good if you can use both. And it doesn't, by the way, in the list here, it doesn't put the heart under feminine. The heart is not the feminine. The heart is part of the soul. So what we haven't talked about is the soul quality. So there's a third line, but I don't want to complicate things so much. I think for the conversation that we're having out there in the corporate world and as a leader, this is good for today. The soul conversation is about the heart and soul searching. So there's a whole other conversation we can have another time. So the heart is kind of somewhere in the middle, and it gets informed and it interacts with both of these, let's call them pillars of these qualities that are available to us. Out of curiosity, how do you think, just think for a moment, feel into an out of balance feminine? How does that look like? And have a look at that list. And I'm sure I'm going to see some smiles just now. Because I imagine that the one or the other of us has also experienced that. We might have experienced that we flicked into the out of balance masculine, and we might have been flicking into out of balance feminine. And many of them are not that we are needy or we are exploited, and sometimes we are, but often we feel it. We feel exploited, we feel weak. And somebody was saying earlier, a lot of people would actually have said that some of the feminine qualities in green are considered or described as weakness. But that has probably come because sometimes when the feminine goes out of balance, and that can happen in a man, by the way, just as well as in a woman, then it is really difficult to be around. If you think of somebody who sometimes drops into this out of balance feminine, it's not comfortable either to be with people in that state, or with ourselves for that matter. Any ideas or any comments on that? I know it's a really honest conversation, but needy for being with a man, like you looking for a husband, is something that's in our society, many societies. If you're not having a husband, so then become needy for a husband, for somebody, which is the masculine. But he's not going to save us if he's the wrong masculine, and then we end up maybe with the wrong type. But any thoughts of you about the out of balance feminine and where you might have seen it, or in particularly maybe also in a corporation?
Maybe viewed as
overly
something
sentimental, not sentimental, overly sentimental.
So
overly sentimental, it's just too much. It's just too much. And that's, I just want to say this, right? So this is a list out of the, it's not the list. It's not the truth. It's a thought-provoking list. And then we might have to take some words off or put more words on and so on. It's just an approximation of helping ourselves to get our head around what masculine and feminine actually means and what it means for us. So it's not the truth. And I'm quite happy also that we challenge some of those words and where they are on the list. So I'm not saying they are the truth, they are a help for us to grasp this concept. But I certainly have experienced the unfocused, the irrational. Yeah, and there's a lovely conversation as well in the chat. Have a look at the chat.
This is about was it Stephanie?
Yeah.
I really encourage
Cried
you.
in a meeting.
There's nothing wrong with crying, because we all have bodies, and our bodies have physiological responses. And so you sweat, you shiver, you get goosebumps, and you cry. And so it's a physiological response to that. From the physiology, you've got water coming out of your eyes. Your tear ducts are producing water that's coming out of your eyes, and the internal narrative that you are ascribing to that. And someone once said to me that, you cry because you care so much. If you didn't give a shit, you wouldn't cry. So first up, it's a massive strength that you care, because a lot of people don't. Secondly, you're releasing those emotions. So you release them, and then normally after 5 or so minutes, you can actually get on with the job. And so when you start talking about to yourself and other people about the fact that that's okay, it's just my body doing this thing, this is what my body's going to do, and yet I can be in control of that. I can't, because that's my body. But my brain, my thinking, my logic, the extent to which I want to explain this or not, or lean into that emotion or not, that is completely my choice. So for me, it's not a sign of weakness at all.
No, and for me, it would also not be on that list. I think if somebody would be crying every 5 minutes but I think there's also the authenticity, and remember, the authenticity is actually on the masculine list. So again, we can do this thing and say, this is real. If you combine it with a strong authenticity and the courage and the strength, and say, I'm really embracing my feelings recently, and I want to be more authentic also with my tearful or move, that I'm allowing that to show, then it becomes it stays a quality and a strength. So the tears as such will not be a weakness, particularly if you start combining them, or if they come together with some of the masculine, which builds also a bridge to those that are currently maybe in the more masculine state, and they go, yeah, I understand. And I think we've seen that COVID was brilliant for that. Absolutely. Like, it was all about vulnerability. As a manager, if you couldn't be vulnerable, your people at home wouldn't tell you how they really are. And so all of a sudden we discovered so many feminine values in action through COVID and remote workplaces, didn't we? Vulnerability, empathy, inclusion, openness, trust, nurturing, and just going through them. Intuition, you had to sense sometimes how somebody was. And we had to surrender to the situation, which is just, we had no control over it globally. So the whole, for me, I mean, I'm not saying it's a great experience and I wouldn't have wished for it. And there's a lot of suffering and pain with it. But if we look, the feminization of the workplace was already analyzed by McKinsey a few years ago. And COVID is an opportunity for our workplaces and us as leaders to actually step more clearly and more authentically and more explicitly as a strength into the feminine values. So the feminine values become a strength and we declare them as such. And that's what a lot of the HR type media has done. They've declared trust building and vulnerability and empathy and so on as strengths. There's no good innovation, no good design thinking or human-centered design without empathy. Through design thinking, empathy has found the way into the boardroom through innovation. So there's definitely a rise of the feminine qualities. And I hope with the conversation that we're having today is you're having now a bit of a concept to differentiate feminine and masculine. And yes, somebody said that earlier really nicely, through our socialization and the nurturing, women often have developed more of the feminine values and the men maybe more of the masculine values through the education. But in no way are they gender specific. And I would wish that every man and every woman embraces all the green values fully. And in every moment of their life, they can choose how they mix them together. So every moment is calling for a cocktail of these qualities. So let's say you have to fire somebody. Yeah, you know, somebody, you have to terminate a contract. How can you now mix empathy and openness and reason and integrity and have a conversation about having to let that person go? Mental over it and maybe feel I'm exploited together with the person that's being fired and I have an exploitation feeling. How can I bring myself back into a more centered state that embraces all those green values? These are your pillars of strength, your pillars of quality of life. And in every moment, so you don't want to find a sweet spot in between. You want to use, it's like a toolbox. In every moment of your life calls for a particular cocktail of these qualities. Yeah, I think I would like to wrap up. I mean, I'm glad some of you also challenged and provoked. It's really a thought provocation and it's not the truth. Maybe you can ask me some questions or we can also talk about how do I develop my feminine, which is a huge, big question because many of us had to neglect it, like some of you will rightfully describe, we had to neglect it in order to participate in the masculine world of corporate. And so we maybe need to develop the feminine. And there's a really beautiful image that my spiritual teacher gave me. If the masculine is very big and strong in our life, because maybe for whatever reason he became big and strong, and the feminine is like a bit tucked away and not so visible, he feels very alone and solo responsible, and he gets, it's very easy then to get out of balance. Whereas if the feminine in our life is also strong and it flourishes and it comes up, there starts to be a dance between the two and they take decisions together. And it's not so hard to take decisions and you feel much more resourced because they are your resources, those qualities. And then you stand on two pillars. And it's much, much more stable, so to not fall out of balance in this way or out of this and in this way, because you are actually being balanced through the masculine and the feminine somehow together. So yeah, but maybe just a few minutes if you want to ask me something or challenge something.
I'm interested in cultivating the feminine. And so can you talk to us about a few ways about how you might go about doing that?
Yeah. The number one way is, for me, in my experience, is cultivate receptivity. How good, I'm going to challenge you now, and we're not putting it in the chat or something, just think about it yourself. How good are you at receiving compliments? Or are you going, oh no, it's just, you know, on Waiheke is, oh, you have a beautiful dress. Oh, it's just from the op shop. It was just $2. You haven't received the compliment. Who I see some heads nodding there. Receiving love, receiving support. And that also includes asking for support, because when you ask for support, you're actually ready to receive it. So receiving in every form. You can make a journal think about it, really. I invite you to really think about in how many ways can we receive everything. Gifts, compliments, words, help, support, the sun, the moon rays, the ocean caressing us, the wind caressing us. Can we receive all of that? Or are we just focused on the direction and off we go when we're on a mission, which is not receptive? It's being in the masculine, but not being in the feminine. And they're both beautiful, but do we have enough time for receiving? That's how you can cultivate it. And then a key one is receiving intuition. Because I don't think we have any problem with receiving intellect, because our whole schooling and corporate work is all based on intellect. So we hear our intellect, and also it's a pretty loud voice. The intuition is a much softer voice. Receiving your own intuition, listening to your intuition. Every time you have, and women, I do think there is something in women where maybe it's that nurturing, that socialization, where we have intuition. And what I found is the more often you listen to your intuition and follow it and combine it with your intellect, the more often you do that, the louder that voice actually becomes. And it's very good. And I have worked with a lot of top leaders, you know, like top range when we did mergers and acquisitions. They would decide if you buy a company, we're talking millions of euros or marks then, on gut feeling, which is a man's word for intuition. And then we made the Excel sheets and so on to prove that their intuition was right. Only if my Excel sheets would really prove that it's not a good idea to buy them for whatever commercial reasons or something, then they would listen to the numbers. But primarily they were listening to their gut feeling and guiding us to look for this and look for that. And, you know, so developing receptivity, developing your intuition, and then creativity. If you want to do something to develop your feminine, is do creative projects without a plan. So a creative project with a plan is, I'm going to France, and I'm going to photograph 12 doors, beautiful doors, and then I'm going to put them in a poster with 12 pockets, and it's going to be very orderly and nice. That's a masculine piece of art. If you want to train your feminine, you do pieces of art the feminine way, no plan. You're sitting at the beach, and then you pick up a little shell and then a little stone, and then put them next to each other, and you pick up something else, and you pick up something else. And an hour later, somebody else might have joined you and they're doing the same. And an hour later, you realize that you almost created like a mandala, but you had never planned it, but it has emerged. That is a creative project without plans. And you can do that with photography, painting, poetry, anything. And that's what it does. If you think of the feminine being like a pillar of strength that flows another strength, and then you have your masculine pillar, it becomes stronger the more often you use it. And so these are ways of developing it. And then the others will come as well. More sensual, you know, think France and Italy. So it all comes, and we deserve it.
Thanks so much, Sandra. Oh my God, it's so good. I love hearing you talk about these things. As somebody who has a very evolved masculine side, who is on a journey of embracing the feminine side, it's always great to hear this. I've also put Sandra's email address in the chat box here. So if you're interested in more, Sandra's got loads and loads and loads of resources. So drop her a line and I'm sure that she will share some information with you. So shall we give Sandra a big round of applause to say thank you for coming along?
And you know, even one-on-one sessions are sometimes good, because some of these things are very personal that we work through. So feel free to, you know, come with team things or come with personal things. And thank you so much for being open. And I know it's a very big topic, but I hope your gender conversation about how many men or women should be in the board or in a ELT should become a new conversation, is how much masculine and feminine do we want to have in the board.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sandra. And Renee, are you able to put some music on? We're going to have a 15-minute break, and we're going to be back here at 10 minutes past 4 for our last 50 minutes together. Okay, see you.